All right, good morning, all you cool cats and kittens. This is Mrs. Celestine here, back with another read aloud. Our read aloud today is Carlos in the Cornfield by Jan Romero Stevens. It is another great fit to our unit Sharing the Planet, which we have focused on our rights and responsibilities in taking care of the earth. So, one thing that I want to point out about this story is in both English and Spanish on here. So, feel free if you have any Spanish speakers and readers at the house to have them stop and read it to you in Spanish. All right, let's go through our vocabulary words. Our first word is reap. What's our word? Reap. Reap means to gather or receive. So when you reap, you are gathering up the crop or receiving something. Our next word is sow. What's our word? Sow. Sow means to plant something. Our next word is sprout. A sprout is a small growth on a plant, a new little bud. So when it's just poking out of the ground, it is a sprout. Our next word is harvest. Harvest is the process or period of gathering crops. So when you're harvesting, you see that your crop is ready. For example, if you have a tomato plant in your yard, you might see that the tomato is ready to pick. So you are going to harvest that crop. Our last word is cornmeal. What's the word? Cornmeal is meal made from ground dried corn. And another special thing about this book is in the back of the book, it has a recipe for cornmeal. So if you happen to have some cornmeal at your house, you might be able to make the recipe in this book. All right, our thinking job. As we read, we're going to think about how you would describe the main characters in the story. When I describe main characters, I focus on the character's actions and what the character is saying. All right, so be thinking about that as we get started. I have to start this over. Great. Carlos in the Cornfield by Jan Romero Stevens. Oh, there's Carlos eyeing something real nice. Carlos bent down to look through the side of the glass case, then stood on his tiptoes to peer in from the top. Lying on a piece of dark blue velvet was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. A red pocket knife with two blades, a tiny pair of tweezers, scissors, a can opener, and a plastic toothpick. Que hermosura! How beautiful, he said, admiring the knife from all angles. Carlos took all the change from his pockets and counted it slowly, hoping he had enough money to buy the red knife. But he was still several dollars short. As you can see at the bottom, we have the same text in Spanish. Disappointed, he left Senor Lopez's store, hopped on his bicycle, and pedaled quickly down the street. After a few curves, the road turned to dirt and the houses came farther and farther apart. Carlos and his family lived in the fertile Espanola Valley in northern New Mexico. Their home, with its thick adobe walls and high-pitched tin roof, was next to a large field that Carlos's father planted each spring in rows of sweet yellow corn. Oh, how Carlos loved corn. He loved hot corn tortillas, spicy corn tamales at Christmas time, and corn on the cob, shining with butter and sprinkled with salt. On cool fall mornings, he loved hot cornmeal pancakes drizzled with honey. I noticed that in this text right here, in this part right here, he lists a lot of different things you can make with corn: tortillas, tamales, corn on the cob, hot cornmeal pancakes. Ooh, yummy. Feel free to stop if you'd like to read it in Spanish as well. Looks like Carlos is hard at work. Carlos's father picked up a large bucket of corn seed, which looked like dry kernels of corn. This seed must be planted in a very special way, Papa said as he handed Carlos the bucket. You must walk down the first row and drop 3 seeds, no more, in each hole. Otherwise, the corn will not grow right. When you finish the first row, start the second and continue until the pail is empty. Remember, cosechas lo que siembres. You reap what you sow. Do you understand? See, Papa, I do, said Carlos, but he didn't really understand what Papa meant. And when he looked in the bucket, he thought he had never seen so much corn seed in his life. Because this is such a big job, when you are finished, I will give you $5, said his father. Carlos changed out of his school clothes and walked out to the field to help his father. He began working the dark soil with his hoe, breaking up the large clumps of dirt so that it was smooth and even. After about an hour, his father called to him, Mijo, my son, I have a big job for you. Now that the ground is ready, I want you to plant the seed. Come here and I will show you what I need you to do. Oh, Carlos has got the corn seed. We see right there. Oh, and that's him putting how many seeds in each hole? 3 seeds. The father was very specific about that. Carlos could hardly believe his good fortune. With the $5, he would have enough money to buy the red pocket knife in Senor Lopez's store. Carlos was almost too excited to sleep that night, and right after breakfast, he ran outside to begin his job. Uno, dos, tres. Carlos counted out 3 seeds and dropped them into the first hole. When he was finished with the long row, he turned around and looked back at where he started. It seemed so far away. But when he looked in his bucket of corn seeds, it looked just as full as when he had started. Dios mío! Oh my goodness, he thought. I've planted all these seeds, but it doesn't seem like I have used any yet. I'll have to work even harder. So he moved to the next row and started again. So quickly, I want to go to my first question. Why was Carlos so excited about planting the corn? Use evidence from the text to support your answer. Now, Carlos knew how big that field was, but when his dad told him to plant the corn, he was very excited for a specific reason. Why was he so excited? I would encourage you to pause the text right here, go back, reread the last couple of pages, and answer this question. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Make sure you answered it. And here's our text in Spanish if you want to pause. Oh, there's Carlos planting away. Plant, plant, plant. Uno, dos, tres, he said to himself, counting the seeds, and finally he finished the second row. Again, he looked into the bucket. Still, there seemed to be almost no difference in the number of seeds left. Carlos was already starting to get tired and hot. He thought he would never finish his job. Just then, he had an idea. If he put 4 or 5 seeds into each hole instead of 3, he could be finished much sooner. He began to count. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco. 5 seeds in each hole this time. At the end of the 6th row, he looked in the bucket again. The pail still seemed almost as full as before. He was going to have to do something different to be finished in time. Why not put 6 seeds in each hole? All right, let's pause here for a second. Guys, how many seeds did Carlos's dad tell him to put in each hole? Yeah, I wonder why Carlos's dad wanted him to put 3 seeds if Carlos is just going to go and put 6. What would be the problem of putting 6 seeds in each hole? I want you to think about that. Think about how plants grow. What would be the problem with putting 6 seeds in each hole? Talk about it with your family. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, seis, he said out loud as he dropped 6 kernels into the ground. But even that did not finish the job. So Carlos scooped out a handful of seeds for each hole and quickly emptied the bucket, leaving the last 2 rows unplanted. Excitedly, he ran up to the house where his father was having a drink of water. Papa, Papa, I am finished, said Carlos, and he hurried to his room to get his money, hidden in his dresser drawer underneath his t-shirts. When Carlos returned to the kitchen, his father handed him a $5 bill. This is for you, mijo. You deserve it for working so hard. Thank you, Papa, said Carlos, and he ran outside, grabbed his bicycle, and was off to Senor Lopez's store. Guys, does he deserve that $5? Why or why not? Go ahead and discuss that with someone at your house. Here's our text in Spanish. He sure is excited. What's he getting? That red pocket knife. You're just in time, said Senor Lopez. He knew exactly what Carlos wanted as soon as he saw him. The old man folded up the tweezers, scissors, and blades on the red knife and carefully slipped it into a black felt pouch. Carlos paid Senor Lopez and rode quickly home. Every few minutes, he checked to make sure the knife was still secure in his pocket. A few weeks passed and the days grew warmer. Carlos used his pocket knife often. He whittled a long pole for fishing and cut the fishing line with the knife's tiny scissors. Sometimes he needed the tweezers to remove a splinter from his finger. Once he even used the can opener and ate lunch outside with his cousins. Carlos had forgotten about the cornfield. Then one evening at dinner, his father told him the corn had begun to sprout. Carlos had a very uneasy feeling. So we know sprout means it's finally poking up through the ground. I wonder what's going to happen. What do you guys see in that picture right there? Look at that picture. What do you see? Do you notice anything strange about the corn growing? I also see Carlos's face. He looks disappointed or upset. That night, he slipped out his bedroom window. In the moonlight, Carlos could see that his father was right. The little plants had certainly sprouted. In the first rows of the field, the stalks were growing even and straight. But in the middle rows, the plants had come up in haphazard bunches. In the last rows where he had run out of seeds, no plants were growing at all. Desperately, Carlos began pulling some of the tiny sprouts, transplanting them into the empty rows of the field. After working for nearly an hour, he could see it was no use. Tired and discouraged, he crawled back into his bedroom window. He slept late the next morning. When Mama came in to tell him she and Papa were going to visit their aunt and uncle, Carlos told her he wasn't feeling well and wanted to stay home. Interesting. So Carlos goes out in the middle of the night and tries to fix his mistake. So let's go to our next question here. What was the problem and how did Carlos attempt to solve the problem? So you're going to go back into the text, you're going to rewind, go back, and you're going to think about what was the problem that Carlos saw and how did he try to solve that problem. All right. Hope you pause your text and are talking about that with someone at your house and writing down your answer. It's very important to write your answers because when we go back to school in the fall, you want to show your third grade teacher that you're a top-notch writer. Here's our text in Spanish. As soon as his parents drove away, Carlos jumped on his bicycle and headed to Senor Lopez's store. Bursting through the door, out of breath, Carlos told Senor Lopez he wanted to sell his knife. But Carlos, replied Senor Lopez, your knife is used. I cannot sell it again. Oh, please, Senor Lopez, I must have the money back, pleaded Carlos. Senor Lopez scratched his chin. He sensed there was a problem. All right, Carlos, he said, opening his cash register and handing Carlos the money. Hopping back on his bike, Carlos pedaled to the feed store, where he purchased a bag of corn seed. So now we're getting more information about how Carlos is trying to solve this problem. What do you predict? I want you to pause here. What do you predict Carlos is going to do next? Okay, let's keep reading and see. I'm getting some ideas here. He just purchased a bag of corn seed, and now in this picture, I see Carlos outside working in the empty rows. I think Carlos is going to plant that bag of corn seed so that his papa doesn't notice that there was no corn there. Oh. That night, he crawled out his window again, this time to plant the last rows of the field. In the moonlight, he poked new holes with a stick, then walked down the rows, carefully counting out exactly 3 seeds in each hole. Finally finishing his job, he went back to bed, sleeping soundly until the next morning. That year, Carlos's father harvested the field later than usual. He noticed something peculiar about the corn from the last 2 rows, but said nothing. Here's the Spanish text. I wonder what he noticed. That looks delicious. Those must be the hot cornmeal pancakes. One fall morning, Mama made cornmeal pancakes for breakfast. Blue corn cakes, my favorite, said Carlos as he spread honey on a hot pancake. Where did we get blue cornmeal? Why, Carlos, don't you remember? Asked Papa, holding back a smile. You planted it yourself. And at that, Papa slapped both his knees and burst into laughter. Realizing then he had bought blue corn seed instead of yellow, Carlos was embarrassed. See, Papa, Carlos said sheepishly. Then he began to smile. But I remember what you said. Cosechas lo que siembres. You reap what you sow. Interesting. We hear that phrase again. You reap what you sow. You receive or gather what you plant. Guys, let's go to our next question here. sorry, not this one. How does this story show us the meaning of the phrase, you reap what you sow? Use evidence from the text. So to answer this question, I would look at the meaning again of the words reap and sow. And I would think, how has this story shown us what those words mean and maybe what that phrase means for our lives? Make sure you go back, look at the vocabulary words, read the text again, and see how the story shows us you reap what you sow. I'm going to go on. That's right, Carlos, his father said. By the way, I saw Senor Lopez the other day. He said to give you this. And without another word, Papa reached across the table and handed Carlos the red knife. He got his red knife back. Look at how happy Carlos is. All right, guys, that's the end of our story. But one last page, the recipe for cornmeal pancakes. So if you guys want to make those at home, here is the recipe for you. It has the ingredients that you need and the steps at the bottom. And it's in both English on this side and Spanish. Go ahead and pause here for the English side. And pause here for the Spanish side. All right, guys, let's go back. So we were supposed to think about how we would describe our main character in this story. What do you guys think? I want you to talk about this with your family. How would you describe our main character, Carlos? Or maybe even how you would describe his father as well. So you're thinking about their actions, what they did, and thinking about their words, what they said in the story. So I'm going to give you one word I would use to describe Carlos. I would describe Carlos as a risk taker. One reason I would describe him as a risk taker is he had explicit directions from his father, but he defied those and decided to take the risk of planting more seeds in a hole because he really wanted to get done quickly. He took a chance there. And then a risk taker again, because when he saw that it wasn't going well, he went to the store and he tried to fix the problem himself. Now, there are other words you could use to describe him, but risk taker is one of the first ones that comes to my mind. I want you to think about how you would describe him. All right, our last question, and this is the question that's also on your exit ticket. How is farming a big and important responsibility? We saw evidence of this in our text, how farming was such a big responsibility. So I want you to talk about this with your family and answer this question. How is farming a big and important responsibility? Now, I know that it's important because there are things that you do after your crop is ready. So I know that farming is really important, but it's also a big responsibility as well. So how did this story show you that? All right, thanks guys. I hope that you discuss these questions with your family and make sure you do your exit ticket. Thanks, have a great day. Bye.